The crisp, biting December air of the Central Market swirled around Anya Selwyn, carrying the scent of spiced mead and the synthetic cheer of holiday tinsel. She clutched a worn, slightly damp 5-crown note in her glove, her heart a frantic, panicked bird against her ribs. This was it, the absolute, undeniable bottom. Tonight was supposed to be the night. A simple, humble dinner with Preston, the junior accountant, who promised a future of stability, a future she desperately needed to escape the chill of her unheated attic apartment and the endless crushing weight of debt inherited from her late father. But, as was the way of her life, even stability had rejected her. She stood before the self-checkout machine, its bright, unforgiving screen illuminating the stark reality of her failure. 7 crowns and 42 coppers for a small sack of potatoes, a single onion, and a can of stewed tomatoes. Her worn, slightly damp 5-crown note felt like a cruel joke. The 20 coppers jingling in her pocket mocked her. The difference was critical. She bit the inside of her cheek, trying to hold back the hot, stinging flood of tears, a well-rehearsed skill in a life defined by small, relentless humiliations. Her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the 5-crown note. Just ask, just explain, but the words caught in her throat, a lump of shame and desperation she couldn't swallow. She had already taken a breath, ready to plead with the teenage cashier, whose name tag read Jace, and whose expression was a perfect blend of boredom and privileged disdain, when the small, sharp sound of Jace's laugh sliced through the already unbearable silence. "Miss, you're short. That's not a donation bin, you know," he drawled, not even looking up from his phone, a smirk playing on his lips, visible even from her desperate vantage point. The laugh was soft, almost a cough, but in the echo chamber of Anya's humiliation, it sounded like a roaring cannon. She saw a flicker of sympathy in the eyes of the elderly woman in the next lane, but that made it worse. The empty chair opposite her table tonight, the table she'd painstakingly set in her mind, was suddenly a cold, marble monument to her failure. This was the moment, the nadir, the point where she realized her worth was less than 3 crowns. Her eyes burned, and she finally let a single, traitorous tear escape, tracing a cool, shocking path down her cheek. The rejection from Preston hours earlier, a text message. Something better came up. Sorry, maybe next year. Had hurt, but this transactional public dismissal of her basic dignity was shattering. But then a voice, deep and resonant as a cello, broke the icy air, asking a question that would change 3 lives forever. A voice laced with an otherworldly, ancient power, cutting through the canned Christmas music and the sneering laughter of Jace, the cashier. A voice that had never before spoken in a public market, never concerned itself with the mundane shortages of human currency. The very air around the checkout counter seemed to thicken, the flickering strip lights dimming slightly as if deferring to a superior light source. The laughter died on Jace's lips, replaced by a sudden, involuntary widening of his eyes, a flicker of something that looked like primal fear crossing his face before he quickly looked back down, suddenly, intensely interested in the floor. Anya didn't dare turn around, the hot sting of tears still blinding her, convinced this new development could only be a further complication, another hurdle in her already impossible night. She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing herself invisible, wishing the cool, hard floor would simply swallow her whole. The smell of the market, once a source of holiday comfort, now felt cloying, suffocating, a festive mask over the grinding poverty of her life. Why tonight? She thought, the question a silent, desperate scream inside her mind. Why couldn't I just have this one thing? The world had been relentlessly unkind since her father, a simple watchmaker with a complicated heart, had passed, leaving behind a legacy of beautifully crafted gears and impossible debts. The emptiness of her life felt like a physical weight pressing down on her lungs. She recalled the way Preston had looked at her earlier this week, not with cruelty, but with an utter lack of seeing, a profound indifference that was perhaps worse than malice. She was a placeholder, a temporary solution, and when a permanent, shinier object presented itself, she was discarded like a broken spring. That's what hurt the most, the indifference. Her hands still trembled, but she forced them to remain still, her knuckles white. She was the picture of quiet, dignified despair. This market, this checkout line, this shortage of 3 crowns had become the battlefield for her last scrap of self-respect. I won't cry anymore, she vowed, a fierce internal whisper. I won't. But the resolve felt fragile, like thin ice. The seconds stretched into eternity, punctuated only by the low, electronic beep of the self-checkout machine flashing the impossible total. The air, though cold, now also held a distinct, subtle scent, not of the market's spiced mead, but of something deeper, earthier, and powerfully compelling, like rain on ancient stone, or a distant fading ozone from a powerful surge of energy. This scent was foreign, beautiful, and deeply, unsettlingly masculine. She finally, slowly, opened her eyes, ready to face the music, ready to apologize, ready to walk away, defeated, when the voice spoke again, closer this time, right behind her. What is the amount of the shortage? The voice was velvet wrapped around steel, a baritone that resonated not just in the ear but deep in the chest cavity, stirring a profound, ancient rhythm. It was a voice that commanded, not asked, yet held an undercurrent of unexpected, almost tender concern. Anya flinched, instinctively pulling her small plastic grocery bag closer to her chest. She still refused to turn, her dignity clinging to the back of her head like a crown she wasn't ready to drop. The deep voice continued, this time addressing Jace, the cashier, but the words were framed for Anya, a deliberate, quiet shield against the boy's previous rudeness. The young lady appears to be in a predicament. State the precise figure. Jace, now looking pale and strangely compliant, stammered, "The 3 crowns and 42 coppers, sir." Anya closed her eyes again, feeling the blush of shame spread across her neck and into her hairline. The embarrassment was suffocating. She heard the soft, rich clink of coins, not the dull brass of ordinary currency, but the deep, resonant ring of pure silver, being placed heavily on the counter. "Adjust the total," the voice instructed, the tone moving from commanding to dismissive, as if this transaction were beneath his notice, yet utterly necessary. "And perhaps next time, reserve your laughter for a joke that is actually amusing. The struggle of another is not your material." The rebuke was delivered with such cool finality, such inherent authority, that Anya knew Jace would remember it for a lifetime. She finally gathered the courage, turning slowly, hesitantly, to offer a stammered, grateful apology to her unexpected savior. And then she saw him, Damon Ashworth. The name was a whisper in the rarefied air of the city's highest, most ancient circles, a powerful, solitary figure, rarely seen, a titan of industry and, as rumored in the hushed tones of high society gossip, a descendant of the very Shadowkin nobility, the Dajager Countess who founded the city's banking system centuries ago. He was breathtakingly handsome, in a severe, chiseled, almost brutal way, his bone structure sharp and elegant, framed by dark, perpetually wine-tousled hair. But it was his eyes that held her captive, deep, fathomless pools of silver gray, currently fixed on her with an intensity that made her gasp, an intensity that seemed to see not just the desperate cashier line girl, but the real Anya Selwyn, the one she kept fiercely hidden. He was wearing an impeccably tailored, dark woolen overcoat that seemed to absorb the market light, and he stood perfectly still, radiating an aura of cold, quiet power. She noticed then 2 small, slight figures clinging shyly to the folds of his coat, a pair of identical, black-haired children, their eyes the same startling silver gray as his, watching her with a unnervingly adult seriousness. Twins, she registered faintly, the sight of them unexpected, destabilizing the already impossible scene. He didn't look like a man with children, let alone two of them, and certainly not shopping for groceries. Sir, I can't thank you enough, Anya managed, her voice a reedy, pathetic sound. I'll pay you back. If you give me your address, Damon cut her off, his eyes still locked on hers, a faint, almost imperceptible softening around the corners of his mouth. Nonsense, he said, the word a gentle denial of her worry. Consider it a Christmas charity. It is a small matter, indeed. He made to move past her, his mission complete, the sudden, powerful intervention finished. The twins, Astrid and Bronte, however, had other ideas. Even at 5 years old, the Shadowling twins had learned to read people better than most adults. They saw the raw, exposed wound of her loneliness, the profound, empty space her rejection had created. They saw the tear tracks on her cheeks and the fierceness in her grip on the grocery bag, and they made an instant, irreversible judgment. The small girl, Astrid, tugged fiercely on the corner of Damon's expensive coat, forcing him to stop. Her brother, Bronte, mirrored the action on the other side. They looked up at Anya, their silver eyes wide and direct, offering a profound life lesson before the adults could even process the moment. Daddy, Astrid said, her voice a small, clear bell in the silence. The nice lady is all alone for Christmas dinner. Her chair is empty. We saw. Damon looked down at his daughter, his expression shifting from detached power to a gentle, almost comical exasperation that was intensely human. He clearly wasn't used to his private life being managed by small, silver-eyed oracles. Astrid, Bronte, we do not comment on the private arrangements of strangers, he chided softly, but without real heat. Bronte, however, was focused entirely on Anya, and he took a step forward, his hand instinctively reaching out toward her. The weak man didn't come, he stated simply, repeating a phrase Damon often used to describe those who failed to follow through. Maybe the weak man didn't come so you could meet us instead. The pure, unfiltered logic of the child's destiny analogy struck Anya like a physical blow. Every disappointment had led her here. Preston's cruelty, Jace's sneer, the shortage of 3 crowns, all of it had culminated in this impossible, heart-stopping moment. Damon Ashworth, the solitary, legendary Shadowkin descendant, the man of myth and rumor, was standing before her, his life and the lives of his small, profound children, intersecting with hers over 3 crowns and 42 coppers. The high contrast irony of the moment was breathtaking. Her worst moment had become the beginning of something she couldn't yet name. Damon looked from his son to Anya, and in her tear-streaked face, in the unexpected resilience shining through her despair, he saw something that resonated with his own deeply buried solitude. He saw the same quiet strength, the same fierce need to protect one's dignity that he carried like a heavy, unseen cloak. He had lived his life in the self-imposed isolation of the ethereal plane, surrounded by power but devoid of warmth, convinced that his lineage was too complicated, too dangerous for the simple human connections he secretly craved. The 2 children had not just asked a question, they had asked the question, the one his soul had been whispering in the dark for years. Astrid and Bronte, their faces earnest and hopeful, looked up at Anya again, their dual gaze a silent, powerful plea. Damon sighed, a sound of profound surrender, a slow burn of acceptance washing over his powerful frame. He extended a hand, cool, shockingly so, but steady and firm, to Anya. I apologize for my children's directness, he said, his voice now intimate, dropping to a low, conspiratorial murmur that excluded the rest of the market. However, I find their observations are rarely incorrect. He offered her a faint, self-deprecating smile, a flash of warmth that entirely transformed his severe face, momentarily chasing away the Shadowkin chill. My wife passed away 3 years ago. It has been quiet. My attempts at social interaction are, as you have witnessed, managed entirely by my children's intervention. He paused, letting the vulnerability hang in the air between them, an unexpected offering. They are right. The table will be set for 3. And tonight, I have no professional negotiation to attend. He met her eyes, the silver-gray depths holding hers captive. My name is Damon Ashworth. Can we join you for the stewed tomatoes and potatoes? Or perhaps would you join us for a more substantial, if slightly chaotic, Christmas dinner? The final line was simple, authentic, a stark contrast to the dramatic narration of the moment, yet it carried the weight of destiny. Anya, completely overwhelmed, felt the fierce emotional tension of the moment begin to break, replaced by a sudden, dizzying lightness. The weight of the world, of Preston's rejection, of Jace's sneer, of her 3 crown shortage, lifted completely. She laughed, a short, slightly hysterical but genuine sound. The empty chair opposite her was finally filled. She didn't even hesitate. "My name is Anya Selwyn," she said, her voice no longer a reedy plea but a clear, strong acceptance. "And I would be honored to negotiate the vegetables with you." She took his hand, the contact sparking a subtle internal current that felt like fate itself, cool and steady and utterly magnetic. The rejection had been an intervention. The child, as Oracle, had spoken. Their high-stakes narrative had begun. The quick, punchy cut to her acceptance was followed by a slow burn, emotional dissolve to the Ashworth manor, not a cold castle of legend, but a warmly lit, slightly chaotic home. The scent of pine and cinnamon now mingled with the ancient scent of ozone, grounding the fantasy elements. The image of the empty chair was replaced by a visual metaphor of a flickering candle suddenly burning bright. Damon, professionally trained in global finance, found himself genuinely, warmly laughing, as Anya, an accountant's assistant who had just escaped a financial crisis of 3 crowns, gently mediated a dispute between the twins over a shared drumstick. "She's good, Daddy," Astrid whispered, impressed by Anya's gentle humor, her voice a small, clear observation. "She smells like cinnamon and quiet." The final scene, set to intimate piano music, showed Damon and Anya sitting together after the children had gone to bed, discussing not high finance, but the simple, profound failures and hopes of their lives. Damon traced a pattern on the cool marble table, reflecting on the profound irony of the event. "I suppose I owe Jace, the cashier, a substantial bonus," he murmured, his silver eyes catching the light. "Without his profound rudeness, I would never have been forced to intercede, and my 2 professional matchmakers would never have acted." Anya smiled, her eyes deeply sentimental. "Preston's cruelty was a beginning, not an end," she confirmed, echoing the destiny analogy. "I believe in fate now, Damon. Every disappointment led me here." The conversation ended, the camera pulling back to show the intimate glow of the hearth, leaving the audience with the uplifting lesson. Sometimes the greatest heartbreak is simply fate clearing the way for a connection that is fated. The final dialogue, a whisper of deep sentiment, hung in the air. "Maybe we were supposed to cross tonight.